Hello everyone, my name is Shonda and welcome to my channel Under the Needle. So I just got my Deco quilt quilted and bound, and so I want to show it to you guys. So I'm going to show you what I did right, I'm going to show you what I did wrong, and but overall I'm pleased with how it came out because I am not a perfect sewer. I like to sew very fast, and so because I sew fast, I make mistakes, things do not come out perfect. So I'm going to show you this quilt. Oh shoot, I forgot that I've got a few safety pins in it still. But I'll actually leave one in because it'll help me show you one of the things that I did wrong. So, all right. So here it is. Okay. So I love how it came out. I love the texture. The way that I quilted this is one of my favorite things to do. For those of you that want to quilt your own quilts, but you don't know what to do, this is one of my favorite things to do. I think that it really worked with this particular pattern. Initially I was going to do straight lines, right? The thing about doing straight lines is that if you go off, it's more visible, right? Because the lines are straight and they are parallel to one another. And so you have to do a lot of marking. It takes a lot more time because you have to be a lot more precise. So I like to do a serpentine stitch. Most modern quilts, most modern sewing machines will have this serpentine stitch. It's basically just a wavy line. And so like if you have a straight stitch only machine, like I have a Juki 2010, that I could not do that. If my Juki 2010 had a serpentine stitch and a zigzag, it would probably be my primary machine, except, over the more expensive Janome, honestly. So let's see, I've got some little things on the back. So I know there was I know I had some issues with the backing, right? I was struggling to figure out what I would use for my backing. And I didn't like any of my options. And so I remembered that I had this luscious ombre fabric by V&Co, right? And I'm like, ooh, that red looks nice, right? That red and the gold, it really looks nice with the front, right? But I only had 2 yards of it. So I'm like, okay, that I only have 2 yards. What am I going to do with 2 yards? Maybe I could, then I thought about, if I could piece the scraps that I had left from making the quilt, if that would be enough. And I'm like, I don't think that that's going to be enough. And then I was like, well, I have a little bit more of this gray fabric. Maybe I can take this and add it in. And I'm like, that's going to be way too much piecing. It's going to take way too much time. I'm going to have to do the math to see if it's even going to work out. I don't know how this is. I don't know. Then I remembered, in addition to this luscious red ombre, I also had 2 yards of this luscious gray ombre. So this is what I ended up doing. So the way the V&Co ombre fabrics work is that it's darker at each selvage, and then it gets lighter. Now the lighter, I did not want that lighter part in my quilt. So, because it looks almost blue. Hold on. It looks kind of bluish. I'm going to show it to you. Hold on. So when you get into the really lighter parts, it almost loses the gray and it almost becomes a little bit sky blue. And I didn't want any of that in my quilt. So what I did was I cut off the selvages. So I took the red ombre, right? And I cut it down the middle, like exactly down the middle, so that I start with the darker red on the edges, and then I bleed into the lighter red. And then I took just the selvage pieces of the dark gray. I think this is a graphite, is the actual color. V&Co Ombre Graphite. And so I took the selvages off, and then I pieced them together so that the darker pieces were facing each other and the lighter ombres were on the outside, and then they would kind of match. That way it wouldn't be like a stark dark next to the lighter red. I didn't want this, the darker part next to the lighter part. So that is what I did. So this is my back. I really like how that came out. So it's like right down the middle. So you can kind of see those wavy line stitches in the back. I used a gold Invisifill on the back in my bobbin. So the stitching is kind of gold, and it kind of blends in and kind of ties in the gold dots on the quilt, in addition to the gold that we have on front. The front was stitched with an Invisifill. Also, I think it was a gray. I'm not sure the exact name of the color. Now, so I like my backing selection really, 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 really a lot. I love how it came out. And I love the thread color that I chose for the back and the thread color that I chose for the front. Now, what did I do wrong? Well, first of all, I stitched too fast, okay? And the Wonderfill is it's a very thin thread. It's 100 weight. It's 100 weight. And so I have areas in my quilt where, because I was stitching too quickly, see if I can show you. I probably should have changed my needle too, but because I was stitching too quickly, I have like a popped stitch here. So I'm probably just going to go in and just take my needle and thread and just do a little hand sewing in certain areas of my quilt where that happened. There are a few areas. I tried to mark them with a safety pin. That's why they're in there. But there are more. I found more. So there's quite a few of them. So I don't know how my quilt will hold up over the long run. I'm not super worried about it because I don't really plan to be using it and washing it all the time. But what I am going to do is I am going to wash this, and I'm going to see how many pop stitches I have, and then I might go in with just a needle and thread, and I'll just use the gray, and I'll just go in and do that, do some hand stitching, just to keep it from unraveling. I don't know. I might just do a little bit just to kind of lock it down. I'm not really concerned about the missed stitch. I'm more concerned about unraveling. I don't want it to unravel. So I might have to do some stuff about that. Another thing that I like that I did was the narrow border. So I originally did a 1.5 inch strip. The only reason I did the narrow border is that I know for me, sometimes when I do the quilting, things kind of shift and get a little wobbly, and I didn't want to have to cut off these little edges. I didn't want to lose these little pink triangles around the edges, and then on this side, the pink ones, and I didn't want to lose any of this striped piece, and I didn't want to lose any of these. I didn't want to lose any of that. So the only way I could be sure that I wouldn't was if I did a narrow border. So I used a 1.5 inch strip and did a narrow border all the way around. I think that if I ever do this pattern again, I will do the same thing because it allowed me to keep the integrity of all of the piecing that I did. I didn't want to lose any of this piecing. So I liked that. So when I went in and after I quilted and I went to trim it, I actually trimmed it down to about 0.75. So I left about 0.75 showing, and that way when I did my binding, which I did the binding the same color as the background, and the same color as the narrow border. So that way when I put this binding on and I have that 1/4 inch, then that 1/4 inch plus the this is only like 1/2 inch now, because I left 0.75 showing and then a 1/4 inch for the binding. And then so now I have this whole thing now is like only like what was I going to say? Oh, so 0.5. So yeah, so now the whole thing is 0.75. So I do like how that came out. As far as how I did the quilting, what I did was I stabilized the whole thing first, right? So I did a straight stitch all the way around the quilt. Well, not all the way around the quilt. I did a straight stitch down the 2 long sides of the quilt. I did a straight stitch. And I went back and took that out after I was done with the quilting. But part of the reason I did that, I wouldn't normally do that. Part of the reason I did that was because when I cut this gray piece, I didn't cut it quite wide enough. So since I didn't cut it quite wide enough, I didn't have a lot of extra at all. Like it was tight on the sides. The binding, I mean, the backing was really short on the sides. Like I did not have extra anything. Like it was close. I mean, it was daggone near like the size of my quilt top. You know, the selvage edge was coming up. I didn't even cut off the selvage because I needed it to make sure that I would have enough to hold on to just to do the quilting. So I left the selvage on. And that's another reason why I wanted to cut so much off, was because I needed to get rid of all of that selvage. So I think it would have been better if I had taken another inch or two when I had made the cut. If I had cut another inch or two, I would have had what I needed, but I just really didn't want I didn't want any of this light stuff here in there, but I could have done another inch here and it would have been okay, but I didn't, and it worked out. I was able to force it to work out. Another thing I did wrong, this happens to me quite often because I sew too fast. I get the puckers, right? I'm not a perfect sewer. I don't strive for perfection. So you see, I've got the puckers. And this is 100% from sewing too fast. Okay. When usually it's either because you're the way you did your basting, and I basted on the wall. So my basting was pretty good. Everything was, I didn't have any puckers in this quilt when I basted it. So this is just from me sewing too fast. I need to slow down, but I don't want to. I wanted to get this thing finished quickly. One of the things that I do is once I start quilting, I usually don't take the quilt off the machine until I'm done with the quilting. Because if I don't, then I almost never go back. I have one that I did that with. I took it off and I've never put it back on to finish the quilting. And now it's like I don't even remember what color thread I used. I have no idea. I've got to go back and figure it out and finish the quilt. So I'm behind on everything else. So I haven't done my snow along. So I didn't finish my blocks. Last week I was supposed to finish the blocks for the snow along, the last 3 blocks. And then this week we're supposed to put it together. It's Thursday. So in order for me to finish on time, I've got to get those blocks finished and get the quilt top put together. But I was late doing that because, like I said, once this goes on the machine, it doesn't come off until the quilting is done. I like how my binding came out in the back. Binding is not my jam. I used 2 1/4. I probably could use 2 1/8, but 2 1/4 is just really, really safe for me. I like to put my binding on from the front, flip it around to the back, and then stitch in the ditch on the front to capture the back. That was a little tip I learned from Donna Jordan. Now, mine is not exact, right? Because if you get it, if you're perfect, right, your stitches will be along the edge of the binding. Mine are not. And it's kind of on purpose, because if I make the binding any smaller, that margin for error is kind of, it's harder. The smaller you make the binding strip, the harder it is for me to catch it in the back when I stitch in the ditch from the front. I did consider another way is to do, you can stitch in the ditch. You can attach it to the back, wrap it to the front, and then top stitch the edge. I don't really, because you can see that line of stitching, and I don't really like that. So this is just my preferred method of binding. I think it came out pretty well. I do use glue to make sure, because if you watch Donna Jordan, what she does, she just kind of wraps it around and holds it. Well, I am no Donna Jordan, okay? And it doesn't work that well for me just to wrap it and hold it. Mine always ends up scooching and smashing, and then I flip it over and I've missed the binding in several areas, and I have to go back and restitch it. So it's easier for me just to use some glue and heat set it, just regular old Elmer's washable school glue, right? And I'll just put it along the back, wrap it, heat set it, and then that'll keep that binding in place, and I don't have to deal with pins. I don't have to deal with clips. It's just, it ends up being faster. It's another step to do that, to do the glue, but it ends up being faster because you don't have to go back and fix your mistakes, or at least me, right? Because I sew too fast. And so invariably, I'll go back and find areas where I did not capture the binding. And then I've got to put it back on the machine and hold it and stitch it and do it again and then it looks ugly. So by the time I go back and fix all my mistakes, it's easier to take 10 minutes to just do a line of glue, fold it over, heat set it with the iron. It stays in place. When I wash the quilt, the glue will wash completely out, so I don't have to worry about it. And so that's what I like to do. So if you guys want me to make a binding video, I can. I do have another quilt that I quilted. I don't even know how long it's been. I did it. It was the Sewing Social quilt. Hold on. It's still sitting here. I barely did any quilting on this sucker. I basically just stitched near the ditch and just did squares. Like I did not do much on this. I literally just stitched near the ditch all the way everywhere, and that was pretty much all I did. But I made the binding, but I have not attached it yet. So if you guys want me to do a binding video, I can demo that using this quilt. But there's a lot of folks out there that have some pretty good binding videos. So again, this is my finished Deco quilt. So what I did, how I did the lines, because you don't just want to do all the lines, okay? You don't just want to start in the middle and just start just doing the lines all the way down. Don't do that. What I did was I did lines. I did one here, like here, 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 like basically down the middles, here, here. That's what I did. And then I went back and added a couple of additional lines. Like I put one here, like on where it would pass through this edge of the square. I put one here where it would pass through this edge of the square. And then I went down the quilt and did that. And then I went back, once I got all of that done, then I went back and I filled in 3 additional lines between the lines I had already made. So these end up being, I don't even know how far apart they were, because I didn't measure it. I just kind of did it spatially based upon the quilt itself. But if I go from hill to valley, they're about 0.75 inches apart, I guess. At the, I don't know, because I really didn't care. Another reason why I really like this design is that it's so forgiving, right? Because it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter if you go off. It doesn't matter. Where a straight line might matter, it might show, you might see it. It's just random. So, and because it zigzags, it moves, it moves. You can't tell if you get off your line. It's completely unnoticeable in the finished quilt if you get off your line. It's not noticeable at all. But yeah. So just I'm gonna fold this a little bit so you can kind of see the back and the front at the same time and see how the colors just really work. It really works. I'm really happy with it. I'm glad this is done. I'm not even going to put it in the washing machine right now. I normally wash them right after I'm done. I'm going to wait to wash this. Yeah, Deco is done. Quilted on time. So now I've got to get the snowflake one done. So that is it for me, because I need to go work on my snowflake quilt so I can make that video as well. And I'll see you guys next video.